3 years ago, my dad and I were driving home Christmas night to do chores, that is, feed the critters. I had done first regular league middle school robotics for years, and now that I was in high school, I was finally old enough to be a judge for their competitions. We were discussing the upcoming event that I had volunteered for in January, when we realized that I needed a crazy hat to wear to the competition. When my dad jokingly suggested that I needed a robotics hat for a robotics event, an idea was born. I started thinking about how I had used Arduinos before, and who doesn't like candy? The obvious conclusion was a robotic hat with an Arduino-powered mechanism that dispensed candy. A top hat seemed like a great place to start, as it offered the most amount of space for me to put a robot subassembly into. And I landed on using Starburst since they're all individually wrapped, conceptually uniform shape and size, tasty, and some might even argue slightly addicting. With this in mind, I completely overestimated the size of my head, ordered a top hat, and began catting.
The result was a top hat with a 3D printed subassembly that slid into it. At the base is a bulkhead with a rail system that all the plates slide onto, which then is attached to the hat by two steampunk gears that twist lock in place and hold the assembly to the hat. The first assembly to slide onto the bulkhead is the Starburst rack. This holds a Starburst magazine and ejection mechanism. The rubber band pulls Starburst down the magazine to fill the chamber, which is then ejected by the servo. After a revision or two, I position the magazine at an angle to make it as long as possible while also not being in the way of my head. The next plate slides onto the rails and is secured by 3 screws, one into each end of the rail. This electronics rack holds all the electrical components like the Arduino Mega, battery, and breadboard, and acts as a command center for the rest of the hat. Once the subassembly is in the hat, all that is left is to trigger the hat and to get a starburst from the inside to the outside of the hat while also matching the aesthetic. Matching the steampunk theme, I gutted the goggles and added a hinge to a fake lens that allowed it to be lifted up and swung out of the way. Once the candy passed through, a rubber band from my braces would pull the lens closed, and the hat once again looked like an innocent and simple attempt of a high schooler to fit in and wear a steampunk-themed hat. And again, at FLL events, you're supposed to have a crazy hat. Out of pure luck, Amazon accidentally sent me a touchless water sensor. While playing around with it, I realized I could sense more than just water. Set up inside the hat, I could sense through the hat's felt-like material, detect my hand on the other side, and send a signal to the Arduino, which would then begin ejecting the starburst. Once triggered, the operator then lifts up the hinge lens on the goggles, and the starburst slides out of the chamber, down the cardboard chute, through the lens, and into the hands of a very excited child. The result of this excitement, especially at youth robotic events, is that it breaks the tension and apprehension that many kids have when they are experiencing something new, talking to new people, or just being in large crowds. On top of this, watching candy come out of a robotics hat just from the wave of a hand not only makes them interested in the candy, it also makes them interested in STEM and fosters the love of learning and problem solving that comes with it. But enough about handing out candy. Let's get back to actually making it happen. So after multiple failed prints, a few late nights, and to borrow the phrase from Stuff Made Here, many hours of integration hell, the hat worked. But it had multiple temporary fixes, such as a cardboard chute, hacksawed parts, screws straight into plastic, and when you're an entry-level CADer, everything is much smaller in person than it looks on the screen in the CAD software. The hat also ran on a 9-volt battery, which limited runtime to 2 hours at most, and I had to wear the hat all day at competitions. On top of running out of battery while handing out candy, the small magazine limited the number I could hand out before refilling. The magazine worked off a rubber band, which often jammed, especially when it got slack at the end of a magazine. This combined with a cardboard chute to the lens and a lens that had to be opened by hand led to a number of jams and other repetitive issues. My incorrect estimation of my head size forced me to precariously balance the product of countless hours of hard work and integration hell on my head all day at competitions. Nonetheless, I wore it to multiple events, and despite many issues, it was well received. I had a lot of fun wearing the hat and handing out candy at various events that season, but I thought it could be a lot more fun if I made some improvements, so I jumped at the chance for a Gen 2 when the next robotics season rolled around. For the redesign, I wanted to accomplish 5 main things: make the magazine hold a lot more candy, eject candy reliably, autonomously open the lens, all-day battery life, and I wanted it to feel like I was not balancing a book on my head while wearing it. I kept the bulkhead the same with the same twist-lock gear hole pattern, but to accomplish reliability in an automatic lens opener, I made the magazine run the full length of the hat, and it was powered by a continuous force linear spring inspired by a tape measure I took apart, so that there was the correct amount of force applied no matter how full the magazine was. And to make it fun, I added a second magazine. A rack and pinion sits between the magazine to push starburst from the magazine into the chamber, and as it pushes one into the chamber, another one drops down behind it on the other side, and the process starts over again. The second gen solved the old problems, and even solved some problems I didn't know I had, but the wiring was a rat's nest and looked suspiciously like someone had run out of time for wire management and crammed them wherever they would fit and then used a zip tie to try and make it look intentional. Teenagers these days. The rat's nest would often catch on the magazine slide, and the lack of space on the breadboard limited the addition of extra features. But really, these were all just excuses for me to satisfy my desire to learn how to design a PCB. Or maybe I'm just talking myself into a Gen 3. For Gen 3, I kept the base design and parts for the final gen the exact same. The only thing that changed was the custom printed circuit board and wire routing, as well as multiple new features, including sensors, indicators, and a respectable amount of lithium grease. Just like how I knew as much about CAD as a newborn knows about walking when I started the first gen, I knew even less about how to make a PCB. After Googling best free PCB design software, I downloaded EasyEDA and did what all good intelligent robotics nerds do and opened YouTube. A few hours later, and with a completely unfounded confidence, I began designing a PCB and gained a newfound respect for electrical engineers. With a few more videos, some trial and error, and a little more time than I care to admit, I ordered the PCB. Just like running CAD and PCB design, learning to solder tiny LED leads that no experienced person would ever add took a level of skill I did not have. And while I learned soldering from robotics, it took a few ugly solder joints before I was able to solder a pin without also getting solder over every other pin in a large radius. Luckily, I had to order at least 5 PCBs, so I had plenty of room to play with. I eventually got the hang of it, and I only burned my fingers a few times. The chance to design my own PCB allowed me to not only eliminate the mess of wires, but it also gave me the chance to integrate other components into the design. These components, combined with a few extra lines of C++, allowed me to have a built-in tilt switch that sensed when the hat was upside down and automatically disabled dispensing, which drastically cut down on accidental dispensing, which had especially been a problem whenever I was trying to load and unload the hat. With the addition of a dip switch bank, I could not only disable the tilt switch mode if I wanted to, but I can now also easily change modes and troubleshoot jams. It worked beautifully and is by far my favorite revision. While it was a bumpy road learning all these new skills, from learning how to CAD and 3D print on the first hat, to PCB design and soldering on the most recent revision, I had a lot of fun with this project. And as the robotics season picks up steam, I'm looking forward to wearing it to events, and handing out candy while subconsciously convincing kids that they love robotics.